Ladies and gentlemen, family, let me tell you something that'll shift your trajectory if you grab hold of it today. Motivation is a powerful force. It feels like lightning striking the soul, sudden, electrifying, and inspiring. But like lightning, it's unpredictable. It comes and goes. It surges for a moment and disappears just as quickly. This is where most people fall short in life. They wait for motivation before they move. They think, when I feel ready, I'll act. When I'm inspired, I'll start the business. When I'm motivated, I'll fix my health, grow my finances, fix my family. But let me ask you something. What if that feeling never comes? What if motivation never shows up? Will you sit in the same place year after year, waiting for lightning to strike twice? Here's the truth. The people who build unshakable businesses, unbreakable marriages, and unstoppable lives, those people don't rely on motivation. They rely on discipline. And the difference between the two comes down to identity. Motivation is rooted in emotion. Discipline is rooted You act differently not when you feel different, but when you become someone different. It's not about asking yourself, how do I feel? It's about declaring, this is who I am. Motivation says, I want to run 5 miles today. But if it's raining, if your knees ache, if the bed is warm and the world is cold, you'll talk yourself out of it. You'll say, not today, tomorrow. That's because motivation is fragile. It breaks under pressure. But discipline is bulletproof. Discipline says, I run because I'm a runner, period. That's identity. It's not a matter of desire, it's a matter of decision. When it's who you are, you don't need to feel like it. You just do it. Let me give you an example. You don't need motivation to brush your teeth. Why? Because it's not emotional. You don't say, I don't feel inspired to clean my molars today. You just do it. Twice a day, every day, because it's part of who you are. It's identity-based behavior. You have habits that align with the person you believe yourself to be. B, that B, that B, that B, that B, that B, that's 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 why it's 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 easy. You don't negotiate with yourself. There's no debate, no internal tug of war. It's automatic. Now imagine you applied that same standard to your business, to your health, to your faith, to your relationship. Imagine showing up not because you were motivated, but because you're the kind of person who shows up. That shift would change everything. The most powerful transformation you can make is going from someone who needs motivation to someone who is driven by identity. The question is not what do I want to do, but who do I want to become? When identity leads, actions follow. If you believe you're a disciplined person, then even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when it's not convenient, you do what needs to be done. That's power. That's freedom. 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 Because now your consistency is not at the mercy of your mood. It's not a prisoner to your circumstances. You've made discipline a part of your DNA. And let's be honest, emotions are liars. They will tell you to quit. They will tell you that it's too hard, too late, too much. They will whisper in your ear that comfort is better than progress, that sleep is better than sacrifice, that waiting is better than working. But when your identity is clear, those lies don't stand a chance because you've already made the decision. You don't need to decide each day whether or not you'll show up. You decided once, and you've been walking it out ever since. That's why discipline always wins. Because motivation can be manipulated, but identity cannot. People ask me all the time, how do I stay motivated? I tell them, you don't. You build systems, you build identity. You become the kind of person who does what needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. Discipline isn't sexy, it's not flashy, but it's consistent, it's unshakable. Discipline doesn't get distracted. Discipline doesn't need applause. Discipline wakes up early, shows up when no one is watching, and does the work without a round of applause or a pat on the back. Because it's not about hype, it's about habit. It's not about motivation, it's about identity. And when your identity aligns with your destiny, your actions become inevitable. Motivation is like fireworks. Bright, beautiful, but gone in seconds. It shows up when it wants to, often after a good sermon, a powerful video, or an inspiring conversation. You feel pumped. You feel unstoppable. But then what happens when the alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and the bed feels warmer than the goal feels urgent? That's when you find out whether you were living off motivation or standing on discipline. Motivation will have you sitting a goal at midnight and snoozing your way through the morning. Discipline, on the other hand, gets you up whether you're inspired or not, because it's not about how you feel, it's about what you've decided. Motivation is unpredictable. One day it's there, the next day it's missing in action. It's like a guest that never RSVP'd. You can't build a future, a business, or a legacy on something that's inconsistent. You wouldn't hire someone who only shows up when they feel like it. You wouldn't marry someone who loves you only on the good days. So why would you entrust your purpose, your calling, your vision to motivation? Motivation may get you moving, but it won't keep you going. And in the real world, where success is earned by those who grind in the dark, that inconsistency will cost you everything. Discipline is predictable. It shows up even when your energy doesn't. It doesn't care about how loud the crowd is or how perfect the weather feels. It just shows up. You can set your clock by discipline. You can build a business on discipline. You can raise a family on discipline, because discipline is a system, and systems don't care about feelings. They care about function. You don't have to wonder what a disciplined person is going to do today. You already know. That predictability is what produces results. That's why champions aren't made in moments of excitement. They're made in moments of consistency. Motivation is driven by emotion. It's triggered by a moment, a quote, a temporary surge of inspiration. That's why it's so appealing. It feels good. But the thing about emotions is they change. One minute you're ready to conquer the world, and the next you're questioning everything. You cannot afford to anchor your life to something that's constantly shifting. It's like building a house on sand and wondering why it keeps collapsing. Discipline is the rock. It doesn't waver. It doesn't shake every time the wind of doubt or discouragement blows. It holds firm because it's built on principle, not preference. People think they have a motivation problem when really they have a consistency problem. And consistency doesn't come from motivation. It comes from commitment. Discipline is the manifestation of that commitment. It's the outward behavior of an inward decision. And here's the beauty of it. Discipline is a choice. It's not a gift. It's not a personality trait. It's a decision you make every day to be the kind of person who shows up regardless of the conditions. That means anyone can have it. You don't have to wait for it to strike. You can choose it right now, and you can train it every single day. People often confuse motivation with momentum. Motivation is the feeling that makes you want to start. Momentum is the force that keeps you going. Discipline builds momentum. Because when you show up again and again and again, even when you don't feel like it, you start to build confidence. You start to build credibility with yourself, and that's when things start to shift. That's when people look at your life and wonder how you're moving at a pace they can't keep up with. It's not magic. It's not hype. It's the quiet power of discipline doing its work behind the scenes. Discipline creates stability. In a world full of chaos, that's priceless. It becomes a steady rhythm of progress in a life full of emotional highs and lows. And when others burn out from chasing constant motivation, you're still moving. Not because you're superhuman, but because you stopped chasing a feeling and started mastering a practice. Motivation needs the conditions to be just right. Discipline doesn't care if the sun is shining or if the storms are raging. Discipline laces up its boots and gets to work. Motivation tries to predict the future based on how you feel today. Discipline creates the future by what you choose today. One is reactive, the other is proactive. One is about the moment, the other is about the mission. Discipline gives you control. It takes the wheel out of the hands of your emotions and puts it back in your hands where it belongs. When you live by discipline, you don't get thrown off by every delay, distraction, or disappointment. You're not chasing motivation like a butterfly, hoping it lands on you long enough for you to get something done. You've built your life on something stronger, something more reliable, something that keeps showing up even when the world doesn't. When people talk about getting better, they usually talk about doing something big all at once. They want to make $1 million this year, lose 50 pounds in 6 weeks, or build a business in 30 days. That's the motivation mindset. It chases fast results and dramatic transformations. But the truth is, greatness doesn't come from what you do once in a while when you're fired up. It comes from what you do daily, when no one's watching, when the cameras are off, when there's no applause. And that's where discipline wins, because discipline understands something motivation never will. Small actions done consistently will always outperform bursts of energy done occasionally. There's a principle in life that most people ignore, the law of compounding. It's not just a financial law, it's a life law. Whatever you do consistently compounds. That means if you're disciplined in your daily habits, reading, working out, calling clients, learning, praying, investing, those actions don't just add up, they multiply. Every rep in the gym doesn't just build muscle, it builds momentum. Every sales call doesn't just bring you closer to a deal, it makes you sharper, quicker, more confident. Every hour of focused work doesn't just complete a task, it sharpens your identity as a finisher. That's the hidden power of discipline. It builds layers, it builds durability. It doesn't look like much at first, but over time, it creates something unstoppable. People who rely on motivation miss out on the compound effect. They operate in cycles of energy and apathy. One day they're all in, and the next day they disappear. They go to the gym hard for a week, then nothing for a month. They work on their business like a man on fire, then spend 3 weeks scrolling through social media, waiting for the next wave of inspiration. That inconsistency kills growth. It breaks trust with themselves. It sabotages momentum. And momentum is one of the most valuable things a person can have. When you're moving in the right direction with steady progress, even small steps start producing big results. Discipline builds that kind of momentum. It's not emotional. It's mathematical. You show up, you repeat, and over time, the results show up too. But the key is this, it doesn't always look impressive. It's often boring. It's repetitive. It's thankless. But that's exactly why it works. Because while everyone else is chasing the next exciting thing, the disciplined person is quietly stacking wins. They're not making noise, but they're making progress. They're not seeking attention, they're mastering alignment. And when the harvest season comes, they're the ones reaping what others only dreamed about. This is why disciplined people always outperform the motivated ones in the long run. Because they're not waiting for a moment to do the right thing, they've built it into their routine. They don't need a spark. They've created a structure. They've built a life around principles instead of feelings. And because of that, their growth is exponential. They're the ones who keep showing up when everyone else quits. They're the ones who do the hard things long enough to make them look easy. They're not lucky. They're consistent. The people who win in life are not the ones who do the most exciting things once. They're the ones who do the right things repeatedly, even when it's hard. Even when it's boring, even when there's no feedback, no validation, and no recognition. because they understand that the scoreboard eventually reflects the work. It may take time, but the results always reveal the roots. If you've been planting seeds of discipline every day, the harvest is not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. This is the reason why real success is never sudden. It may look that way to people on the outside, but to the person who's been disciplined for years, it's just the fruit of obedience. That book that suddenly becomes a bestseller was written in silent mornings and late nights when the author didn't feel like it. That six-figure business that seems to blow up was built in quiet seasons of rejection, doubt, and discipline. The transformation didn't come from a motivational video. It came from a person choosing to do the right thing every single day, regardless of whether or not they felt like it. Consistency creates evidence. It silences doubt. It builds a track record. And the more disciplined you are, the more undeniable your growth becomes. Even when people don't see it, even when the results take time, there's something being built underneath. It's happening in your mind, your habits, your thinking, your decisions. It's not flashy, but it's real. It's not public, but it's powerful. And over time, it becomes permanent. That's what compounding does. It makes discipline look like a miracle, when in fact, it's just math applied with commitment. There's a lie that's been told so many times, people now accept it as truth. The lie is this: that you need to feel good before you can do good. That action has to be birthed out of inspiration. That you've got to be in the mood, in the flow, in the right mindset before you can produce anything meaningful. But life doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Success doesn't ask how you're feeling today. Your calling doesn't take a day off because your energy is low. And the reality is, motivation follows action, not the other way around. You don't act because you're motivated. You become motivated because you acted. People sit around waiting for a magical moment to strike. They want to feel hyped before they hit the gym. They want to feel creative before they write. They want to feel driven before they start building their business. But here's what most people never discover. If you would just start, the feelings would come. If you would just get up and move your feet, your mind would catch up. You think the mood fuels the movement, but in truth, movement fuels the mood. When you act, something changes inside you. Your blood starts flowing, your focus sharpens, your confidence grows. And then suddenly, what felt impossible 5 minutes ago now feels like momentum. You've been trained by this culture to wait until it feels right. You've been conditioned to believe that authenticity means only acting when the emotions align. But discipline understands something deeper. Feelings are fickle. They can't be trusted. One day they'll push you forward, the next day they'll pull you back. If you give them the steering wheel, they'll drive you straight into regret. But if you take control and act first, regardless of how you feel, those same emotions that were trying to hold you hostage will eventually start to follow your lead. It's not about denying emotions. It's about disciplining them. You don't have to feel like making the call to make the call to make the call. You don't have to feel like reading the book to read the book. You don't have to feel like getting to work to get to work. And once you start doing it long enough, something begins to shift. The mind stops resisting. The body stops complaining. The heart starts aligning. You train your system to stop waiting and start executing. That's where the edge is. Not in the energy you had before the action, but in the energy you unlock through the action. There are days you won't feel inspired. There are seasons where motivation is nowhere to be found. And that's where most people fall off. That's where the crowd gets thin. That's where the results are separated from the dream. But the disciplined person keeps going, not because they felt like it, but because they decided to. They show up on the days when the feelings lie, and because they show up, the feelings eventually bow. The very act of showing up becomes the source of strength, because they know that action repeated builds rhythm, and rhythm is where consistency is born. Think about the athlete who trains every day, not because every day feels good, but because every day adds to something bigger. Think about the entrepreneur who sends that 100th email, not because it feels exciting, but because it builds skill, builds resilience, builds credibility. Think about the parent who shows up for their children day in and day out, not because every moment feels rewarding, but because they've committed to love beyond emotion. These are the people who understand that you cannot wait for the right feeling to do the right thing. You have to do the right thing until the right feeling shows up. There is something powerful that happens when you stop asking your emotions for permission. and start commanding your actions with purpose. You start moving forward not based on mood, but based on mission. You stop needing a pep talk every morning because your purpose is louder than your pain. And once you start moving, it gets easier to keep moving. Hesitation fades. You start to build trust with yourself. You start to believe not because of what you said, but because of what you did. That belief becomes the foundation for greater action. And that action creates the internal motivation people spend years trying to find in a podcast, a quote, or a motivational video. The world tells you to wait until you feel strong to act strong. But discipline teaches you to act strong and watch how your feelings catch up. Because feelings are followers, not leaders. They respond to motion. They respond to decisions. They respond to consistency. When you act from identity and purpose, feelings eventually fall into line. They might fight you at first. They might scream and resist. But over time, they learn that your actions are not negotiable. You are not led by how you feel. You are led by who you are becoming. Everybody wants results, but not everybody wants the responsibility that comes with them. It's easy to dream, it's easy to talk, it's even easy to plan. But it's something else entirely to execute. That's where the line is drawn. That's where discipline separates the doers from the talkers. Because motivation makes promises, but discipline delivers. Motivation shows you the highlight reel. Discipline takes you behind the scenes. And in that backstage grind, where there's no crowd, no music, no spotlight, that's where real success is forged. People love the outcome, but hate the process. They want the rewards, but they don't want the repetition. They crave the prize, but resist the price. And that's the mindset that keeps people stuck. Because nothing of value comes without repetition. You don't get to master a craft by dabbling in it. You don't become great at anything by visiting it now and then. It takes daily, deliberate, intentional action. And not just when you feel inspired, but especially when you don't. That's the part most people avoid. But that's the part that changes everything. Discipline is not about perfection. It's about persistence. It's not about getting it right every time. It's about not quitting when it gets hard. There's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. That gap is not filled by talent. It's not filled by knowledge. It's not even filled by motivation. It's filled by discipline. Talent can get you started, but only discipline can keep you going. Knowledge can guide you, but only discipline can apply it. Motivation can wake you up, but only discipline can get you to work. That's why the most successful people in any field aren't always the most talented. They're the most consistent. Because consistency compounds. Discipline, repeated daily, becomes the difference between average and exceptional. Everybody has a vision until it's time to implement. They see themselves as winners in their imagination. But reality doesn't reward imagination alone. It rewards execution. And execution is never convenient. It doesn't wait for a good day, a good mood, or a perfect plan. Execution demands effort when it's hard. It demands focus when you're tired. It demands action when you'd rather wait. And that's why discipline is more valuable than motivation, because motivation is situational, but discipline is foundational. When you build on discipline, you build on rock. When you rely on motivation, you build on sand. Discipline is doing the right thing when it's the last thing you feel like doing. It's showing up to the practice when nobody's clapping. It's making the call even after 10 people said no. It's hitting the gym when you're sore and tired. It's writing the page when your brain feels empty. And it's choosing progress over comfort every single time. That kind of decision-making doesn't come from emotion. It comes from identity. When you know who you are, you stop negotiating with your circumstances. You stop needing motivation to validate your moves. You act out of alignment with your purpose, not your preferences. The problem is most people have made motivation their fuel, and motivation runs out fast. It burns hot and fades quickly. It's emotional caffeine. It gives you a burst and then leaves you drained. But discipline is sustainable. Discipline is the kind of fuel that lasts. It's built on systems, not spikes. It's built on decisions, not desires. And the moment you make the shift from chasing motivation to cultivating discipline, everything begins to change. You stop waiting and start working. You stop planning endlessly and start producing consistently. People often wonder why some individuals seem to keep growing while others stay stuck. It's not luck, it's not opportunity, it's discipline. The ones who grow are the ones who keep going. They keep doing the work after the mood is gone. They keep building when the applause has stopped. They keep refining their craft when nobody's watching. They have trained themselves to rise above the noise of temporary feelings. They've learned that emotion is a terrible leader, but a great follower. So they lead with discipline, and eventually their emotions fall in line. When you embrace discipline, you begin to trust yourself. Every time you follow through, you build internal credibility. You begin to believe that your word matters, even if no one else hears it. You stop waiting for motivation to rescue you and start realizing that you are responsible for your results. That shift from dependency to ownership is what changes lives. It's what creates leaders. It's what separates those who wish from those who win. And the best part is, it's not reserved for the elite or the gifted. Anyone can develop discipline. Anyone can decide to be consistent. Anyone can choose to show up whether they feel like it or not. Discipline is not just about action, it's about alignment. It's about bringing your behaviors in line with your beliefs, your habits in line with your hopes, and your decisions in line with your destiny. People often say they want change, but their daily choices contradict their declarations. They talk about success, but they keep entertaining distraction. They speak of greatness, but they keep engaging in mediocrity. And that's the disconnect that discipline repairs. Discipline is the bridge between who you say you are and who you actually become. It brings integrity to your life by making your actions echo your intention. Most people live out of impulse. They do what they feel when they feel it, and if they don't feel it, they don't do it. That way of living leads to chaos. It creates inconsistency, confusion, and disappointment. You can't build a life of impact if your decisions are dictated by your emotions. Emotions change. They shift with the weather, with your energy levels, with your circumstances, but discipline isn't based on emotion. It's based on decision. It says, regardless of how I feel, I'm going to act in alignment with my purpose. That kind of clarity produces power. It gives you stability in seasons of uncertainty. The reason discipline is so powerful is because it removes decision fatigue. When you've already decided who you are and what you do, you don't have to wake up every day negotiating with yourself. You don't have to ask, should I work out today? Or should I follow up with that client? Or should I spend time growing today? You've already decided. The answer is yes, because you are disciplined. That mental clarity saves you energy. It sharpens your focus. It frees up your mind to create, to build, to lead. You don't waste time waffling between options. You walk in the certainty of your commitments. People who struggle with progress often blame lack of motivation, but it's usually a lack of alignment. They're trying to produce extraordinary results with average habits. They want high-level outcomes without high-level routines, but your habits are the evidence of your priorities. You can tell what someone values by what they do consistently. And if your actions don't reflect your aspirations, you're not going to grow. You're going to stay frustrated because deep down, you know what's possible, but your choices keep disqualifying you. Discipline is the recalibration. It brings you back into agreement with your vision. The most successful people are not always the most talented, but they are the most aligned. Their day-to-day life supports their long-term goals. They don't wait for the right mood to take the right step. They create systems that ensure success is not left to chance. They design their environment, structure their schedule, and manage their energy in ways that support their purpose. That's the beauty of discipline. It makes success predictable. It creates the conditions where growth is inevitable. Because when your inputs are right, the outcomes will eventually follow. Alignment through discipline also builds confidence. Every time you act in accordance with your values, you reinforce your identity. You prove to yourself that you are who you say you are. You silence the doubt not with hype, but with evidence, and that evidence becomes fuel. It becomes the foundation you stand on when the storm comes, when the pressure rises, when the world questions your worth. You don't have to convince anyone. You've already convinced yourself through consistency. That kind of internal confidence can't be bought, borrowed, or faked. It's earned in the daily discipline of doing what matters even when it's hard. The reason most people drift in life is not because they don't have dreams, it's because they lack alignment. They're inconsistent in the things that count. They build one day and break the next. They plan with purpose and then act with passivity. That kind of double-minded living produces double-minded results. Discipline brings you back to center. It simplifies your life. It cuts out the noise. It says that this is who I am, and this is what I do, regardless of what's trending or what's tempting. And the more you operate from that place of alignment, the more peace, power, and progress you begin to experience. True discipline is not restrictive. It's liberating. It frees you from the chaos of living by default. It releases you from the frustration of unfulfilled potential. It breaks the cycle of self-sabotage by locking you into a rhythm of responsibility. And over time, that rhythm creates results that others call extraordinary. But to the disciplined person, it's just the fruit of alignment. It's the natural outcome of living from identity instead of impulse, of acting from vision instead of reaction, of choosing principle over preference, day after day, decision after decision. The reason discipline creates lasting transformation is because it works on identity, not just activity. Anybody can change a habit for a week. Anyone can commit to a new routine when the excitement is fresh. But discipline doesn't stop at what you do. It reshapes who you believe you are. It doesn't just produce temporary action, it creates permanent alignment. When you practice discipline over time, it rewires your self-image. You no longer just act like someone who succeeds, you become someone who expects success. You start operating from identity, not inspiration. And you don't just try to win, you show up as a winner. This is why people who rely on motivation burn out. They're trying to act in contradiction to who they still believe they are. They haven't built the foundation of discipline that reinforces a new self-concept. So when the emotion fades, the action does too. They fall back into old patterns, not because they lack desire, but because they lack structure. They haven't made the shift from doing to becoming. That shift is the key to long-term change. When you do discipline things long enough, you become a disciplined person. It's no longer something you try, it's who you are. Most people never reach their potential because they never build an identity strong enough to support it. They want breakthrough results, but they keep dragging around the same belief system. They speak of transformation, but carry around the same story. And that's why their motivation keeps dying. It's being choked by the weight of old identities. Discipline doesn't ask if you feel like doing the work. It asks, who are you becoming? And then it demands actions that agree with that future version of yourself. If you want to change your life, you must first change what you repeatedly do. And if you want to sustain that change, you must shift how you see yourself. Think of it this way. Every disciplined act is a vote for your future identity. Every workout, every early morning, every focused hour, every difficult decision, it's all casting a vote in favor of the person you say you're becoming. And eventually you vote enough times and it becomes impossible to deny. It starts to feel strange to break your habits. It feels unnatural to skip what used to be optional. You've hardwired your identity into your daily behaviors. And once that happens, you don't have to fight for momentum every day. You've already built it. You're not chasing greatness anymore, you're walking in it. The reason most people can't maintain consistency is because they treat discipline like a tactic, not a transformation. They see it as something to try when life gets hard instead of something to build before it does. But discipline is not a response to pressure. It's preparation for purpose. It's not reactive, it's proactive. It builds the internal infrastructure required to handle the weight of success. Because success has a weight, it comes with responsibility, with decisions, with demands. And if you're not disciplined before success shows up, that same success will crush you. Discipline creates capacity. It stretches you now so you don't break later. People admire greatness, but they often forget what built it. It wasn't just talent. It wasn't just timing. It was repetition. It was the decision to do what others wouldn't for longer than others could. Greatness is not the result of a moment. It's the reward of thousands of micro decisions made in alignment with a future vision. And most of those decisions were boring. They were unseen. They were inconvenient. But they were made anyway. Because disciplined people understand that today's sacrifice is tomorrow's standard. They know that everything they're doing is building something far beyond what the eye can see. The real power of discipline is that it teaches you to lead yourself. Before you lead a team, a company, a movement, you have to lead you. You have to tell yourself no when it would be easier to say yes. You have to keep moving when it would be easier to stop. You have to show up on time, follow through, deliver, push, and grow, whether anyone notices or not. And when you get to that point where you don't need external accountability to stay excellent, you become unstoppable. Not because everything is easy, but because nothing owns you anymore. Not comfort, not fear, not laziness, not distraction. The freedom that people crave doesn't come from escaping discipline. It comes from embracing it. Discipline gives you choices. It gives you time, energy, clarity, and peace. It opens doors because it builds trust. It creates options because it eliminates chaos. And the best part is that it's available to anyone. You don't have to be the most talented, the smartest, or the most connected. You just have to show up. Keep showing up. Keep choosing growth. Keep aligning your daily decisions with your future identity. Because the moment discipline becomes your default, transformation is no longer optional, it's inevitable.